Hi, welcome to the July 1st, 2020 Club Cubase Google Hangout. We'll get started here in a couple minutes. I'm going to do just a quick audio test on my end. Bear with me just a second. And we'll be getting people logged in. Okay, so it seems like we have audio. I'll try to monitor if we have any issues. But we're going to let people get logged in. If you haven't attended, my name is Greg Ondo. I work with Yamaha Corporation of America based in the United States, outside Washington, D.C., in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you haven't been to a Google Hangout, this is basically a live Q&A session. So you could ask questions in advance by sending them to Club Cubase at steinberg.de, or you could ask them in the comments field. I'm going to turn my volume of my phone down. So you could ask in the comments field. We'll try to go through them as succinctly and completely as possible. We will, if you ask the same question over and over and over again, it doesn't increase your chance of it getting answered. It'll just kind of clog up the stream. We'll try to go through them chronologically. We'll go for a few hours, several hours today. So if you are watching this Hangout live, please feel free to introduce yourself. If you're watching a replay, you could feel free to introduce yourself in the comments as well. But feel free to tell us who you are and where you're from. Like many of you during this time, my family's at home, so you may hear my wife who's working directly above me and my son. I may have to stop the Hangout and put a movie on for him throughout the session once or twice. So I'll apologize in advance for that. We'll try to keep the disruptions to a minimum. So you could go ahead again, and we'll probably have the all the topics covered in today's Hangout covered and indexed later tonight. If you're asking questions, sometimes it's helpful if you could specify, which computer you're on or which version of Cubase. So if you're on Cubase AI or Cubase LE, that can make a difference than a question from like a Cubase Pro. So sometimes that could cut down on some speculation and speed things up as well. But let's go ahead and see who is on the Hangout so far. And we'll get started. If you're watching this on a replay, maybe if you want to fast forward to about 9 or 10 minutes, we'll see if we should be up and running by then. But let's go ahead and see who's on. So I see Ted. We have 55 gig 55, I think is Jan from Stockholm. Good to see. We have Vinny from Orlando. We have Gareth. Okay, so we have Millard. All right, so we have Agent K. All right, so we have, I think it's Kyrie or Kiri from London. Good to see you. A lot of consistent attendees here. Okay, so we have Kenosha, Wisconsin. We have Holland, Venezuela, South Shields, England. We have Robbie from Dallas, longtime Hangout attendee. We have Australia. Okay, so we have Finland. We have Matt from Fort Wayne. Greencastle, Pennsylvania, and for Neil. All right, so Netherlands, Iran. Okay, so I think we have so far 4 continents. Let's see if we can get someone from, I'm not sure if we have Africa yet, but I think we have all the other continents. We have Australia, we have Mexico. We have from Mexico but living in Madrid. All right, so we have Crystal Coast, North Carolina. Okay, we have Anna from the UK. We have India. Okay, so we have Gareth from the Basque Country. And Gareth has succeeded in my quest to have someone from Antarctica so we could have 6 continents. I appreciate that, Gareth. That's very kind. All right, so we have Luxembourg. Okay, we have more people getting logged in. All right. Rob Portoff, good to see you on the Hangout. We have Istanbul. So I'm just seeing Greg, do our chat questions ever disappear? Are they ever deleted at the beginning of the show? Don't see my question. I think I have your question still preserved, but sometimes if you enter them before the Hangout starts, they can disappear. But I think for the user of the range control, I have your questions. I think it's Jay from New Haven. Yeah, so I have your questions on another chat screen. I have multiple chat screens, but sometimes they do disappear if I get too far behind. So apologize for that. All right, so we have more people getting logged in. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. Thank everyone for attending. If you haven't subscribed to the Cubase YouTube channel, you can make sure that you do that. Okay, so we have Berkshire, UK. We have people, Pablo from Spain, who's apologizing for being late. You don't have to worry about it. We're not in school. Okay, some more people getting logged in. Okay, still more people getting logged in. So just see a quick question. Can I use an iLock in order to upgrade to Pro from Elements? So Steinberg doesn't use the iLock technology, so you need to get a USB e-licenser. Very similar in concept. All right, so we have Denmark. All right, we have Peter from Germany. Okay, so see some questions from Pinder. And we'll get started here in just a minute. All right. So we have Juan from Malaga, Spain. I've been there a couple times. Enjoyed it. Okay, just a little bit. We'll get started. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with our stream. I'm just going to lose something here really quick. I should take care of before we get started. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Jay from New Haven, Connecticut. I'm having issues with my audio setup in control room. I noticed that you and others have monitor, cue, and other things in your list, but I'm always forced to have a stereo option. I can't seem to get out of it. I removed, deleted. I am seriously beginning to wonder if that's causing most of my issues listening in the queue. Is it a bug? So I think if we go to our, let's start with our studio, with our audio connections, and let's go to our studio, our control room. So I'm not sure why you're kind of forced to have particular, let's say if I wanted to add a monitor here, I could choose to make this monitor in mono. So let's say, now I could have a mono output, but let's check my cues. Let's just go ahead and remove one of my cues here and see if this is going to. So let's say if I wanted my cue to be in mono, so I could have my cue mix in mono. I could have my speakers configured as mono, which I have in my personal studio. So I'm not sure what is, and maybe you could, since it's early in Hangout, why you indicate you're always forced to have a stereo option. But you could have, if we added inputs. So let's say if I want to add an external input, I could choose for that to be mono. So it looks like just about all of my other options I could do in stereo or mono. So maybe if you could let us know, Jay, what is what you feel is being forced in mono. So, all right. Let's go ahead and, all right, my timeline and my chat has jumped way ahead, but let's move on. So just see, hi Greg, thanks for your time as always. Question, anybody have a problem with Cubase freezing on close while using acoustic audio or Slate plugins? It involves D3D10 warp.dll renderer. So I haven't heard of that, but I have heard of different plugins that have caused problems. I had one client that was trying to figure out what was causing his Cubase to hang, and it was like an old Rewire driver that was installed like years ago that he hasn't used. And once he deleted that, it was not causing any problems at all. So that may be, so it could be something like that, but you could try to see, if maybe not using it in a particular project makes a difference. And I think if it's not being used in a project, that it might, give you, and if it closes, that it might give you an indication that could be a problematic plugin. All right. So you see Miller Brown, just wishing great to be on a hangout. He says, my best to you and your family. Thank you very much. We're doing great. Okay. Okay, so I see, is there a way to duplicate warp markers on track to another, in my case, using a guitar DI to help edit an amp track? I don't think so, but let's go ahead and see if we could take a look and... to say, I'll just drop this in and we'll check just... All right, and let's say if I duplicate this particular track, and I will go through, let's say, my hit points. So I don't think that the hit points can be translated directly over. So let's say if I set different thresholds, let me just make this a different audio file just to make sure. Okay, so we have so we have kind of different warps here. So I don't think, let's see if I come here and if I group these together, I don't think that will make any difference. So it's just, so let's say I'm just going to adjust this and we'll come here. So it looks like maybe if we group the two tracks together, so I'm just going to select them, hit Control or Command G. I would try this, and then when you go into the sample editor, it looks like that might carry over between the two different tracks. So I adjusted on this particular track and then come here to that track that it looks like the changes made in one. So I would try just selecting both of them and then hitting Control or Command G to group, and then you could ungroup using, let me just try ungrouping it, and I'll adjust one, and we'll see if that carries over and if that will be independent. Yeah, so try grouping them together using Control or Command G, and it looks like that carries over the warp markers that you make in one over to the other. Okay, go through. Okay, so greetings from New York. Hello, Greg. I am having some issues loading my Groove Agent own-made kits. What am I doing wrong? Is that the correct way to save and load them? So once you have a Groove Agent kit that you've created, so it's just come right over here. That you could just kind of right-click and you could say, load kit or load kit with patterns, and then you should be able to see your ones over here, but you could also just come over to like user presets. So let's say if I just go to my media bay, let's go to user presets. I think I may have to say VST instrument. And let's just see if this is one that will load up. So see what instrument this is, but you could just kind of load it directly over here. And that's let me just try. So, but your Groove Agents sets will just kind of show up under your user presets. So if you just kind of go to your media bay and then go to user presets and VST instruments, you should be able to kind of load them up directly there. I'll try this one just in case this is a Groove Agent. I think there's a Groove Agent one in here that we've done over the time. No, I'll try one more. Yeah, so, but they would just kind of show up in the user presets. All right, good to have Rob Podorf on the Hangout. Great to see all his projects he's doing in Cubase. All right, so so I see question, would replacing my 816 CSX Firewire with newer UR824 USB 2 improve anything? I think they sound very similar. Just one is one is FireWire based and one is USB based. I'm personally in my studio still running the old MR816 CSXs, and maybe my new computer, if I don't want to invest in a FireWire card, or if it's hard to get FireWire, I may move on to something else like a USB based interface. But I think sonically they're slightly different but very similar. So you wouldn't notice. I don't think you notice a huge change. Okay, so see, question, hi, I'm from Mexico but live in Madrid. Why we can't put dotted quarter notes as tempo value on Cubase, 10.5, Catalina, 10.52. So currently, and I've had some discussions with developers on this, so currently it's set to like a quarter or half note, and there isn't values for dotted quarter notes if you're doing stuff like 6/8. And that's just kind of how it is, but there's been some discussion on it. I know I've mentioned it before to developers, and I think some of them have done some research on it. So okay, so we have sir, I have a Blue Yeti USB mic, but my output bus is not working. Please help me. You got to make sure that your Blue Yeti mic, and I know there's a number of different Blue mics. I don't know all the different models, but you want to make sure that when you go to, and you don't specify if it's on Mac or PC, but if you go to your audio connections, you should see like your inputs from your Blue Yeti, and make sure that you have outputs either, if you have Cubase Pro, like in the control room, like I have my UR24C labeled there. Some of the earlier mics, only had an output, or would only record but didn't have a way of playing back, and that was always problematic for a lot of programs where using two different audio interfaces with different drivers. It's one thing if you're doing like a webcam type stuff, but for recording, making sure that the two of them were kind of in sync can be problematic for most DAWs, so that's kind of not recommended. But just make sure that you have your inputs set to your Blue Yeti, your outputs set to your Blue Yeti for your driver, and make sure that when you go to your studio setup, you may have when you go to your Steinberg, when you go to your VST audio system, if you have a dedicated ASIO driver, you could use that. If you're on Windows, it may just be where you see generic low latency, and then within the control panel, you would map out like which inputs and outputs you're using. Sometimes if you're just using the Windows driver, it may you may take the record the sound from the Blue Yeti, but try to play it back through another interface. So make sure that you have kind of within the generic low latency settings that you're routing the audio directly to the Blue Yeti, and that should do the trick. Okay, we'll just move on. Okay. So we have, hi Greg, thanks for all your previous answers. This week my mono switch in a control room doesn't work. No idea what's happened. Cubase Pro. So when I'm just kind of playing around, let's say if I come here, I have I think just kind of generic drum loop here. Let me just put this in a loop. So there's not too much. So let's say if I'm here and I wanted to just go to my control room, and on the down mix presets, click on mono. So there's your mono, and now we listen to it in stereo. So, make sure that, it's something that is, I've seen some people, do that. And it could be like, I've seen some people, oh, my mono doesn't work and their speakers are out of phase. It's a little less likely with powered speakers now. But there's nothing, once that's kind of set up, that's just a quick down mix preset. Make sure that, if you're hearing them both in stereo, you should be fine, because this is going to kind of sum it down there. You could also try, plug in on your master bus and see if you get, if that isn't making any sound. I think if you just come over here, there's a mix convert plugin. And here you could just say, okay, I want to go stereo to mono, and see if you hear that. And if both of those are not giving you the results as expected, it could be maybe something is wired, or something in the routing is a bit different and maybe off in your audio connections. So make sure that your audio connections for your monitors are set appropriately. Okay. Okay, good to see. I think we have Mabali from South Africa. That's great. All right. All right, more people from Spain. So I just see question, is there a way to disable the scroll wheel when adjusting parameters in the mixer window, so you don't have to find a blank space to scroll down? So let's go ahead and just open up our mixer window. So let's just say, so, generally, like when I'm scrolling, I just kind of, so let's say if I have a number of different parameters open, I will just tend to navigate personally just over to the edge when scrolling up and down, so I don't inadvertently change values. So think, just to maybe navigate directly to this edge here when navigating, and then there's no parameters to adjust. I know sometimes it may be, you may want to just adjust here or go in between different values. So if you're just kind of cognizant, but if you're, have a very narrow mixer view, again, you can just kind of go, but this will always work for you. But there isn't a way to disable this scroll wheel in the mixer, because you could use it for a lot of different things. All right, question. How can you make tracks transparent so you can only see the waveform, or almost transparent? All right. So let's say I'll just go ahead and colorize these tracks here. I'll make them kind of we'll make them kind of yellowish here. So let's say we have these two tracks, and I wanted to see the events transparent. And this was kind of brought back, kind of left in 10.5, and then we brought it back for producer Michael Wagner, who missed it. So let's go to your preferences. I think if we go to, might be under event display. Or let me just see if it's under maybe user interface. Might be under event display. Let's say audio. Let me try adjusting some of these. Okay, so I think it's under here. Let me just jump back to audio. Restore the defaults. So let's say we go to event display, and let's adjust event opacity. So I think now when we hit this, that as we come over here, we'll just make this track larger. So now you could just kind of see just the events. So go to your preferences. And then under event display, you'll see event opacity. So we'll just come here. We'll go back to our default value. So you see that. And if you want it to be somewhere in the middle, just kind of apply that. And then so you could adjust. So let's apply that and see what happens. We go up on our tracks. So you can see that these drum parts will be pretty clear, and then we'll just jump back to the preference and load up our defaults for that page. And now you could have that. Okay, so I see a question. Hi, Greg. Patrick from Sweden here. Question: how to copy MIDI length note from one MIDI track to another MIDI instrument track? Example: alto sax and tenor sax. I don't know a way of doing it off the top of my head, but let's see if we could figure something out. So let's say we'll add 2 instrument tracks. Okay, so let's just set up some different rhythms here. Okay, so I will just copy this. And let's adjust like the length of this last note here. So let's see if maybe we can do this with the Project Logical Editor or just a MIDI Logical Editor. Let's see if we can just yes, I don't know of a way to do that automatically. Let me just see if, so I have that rhythm, let's say this rhythm on different parts. If we maybe save it as a quantized preset. So I'll drag that over. So that's shorter. Let's say this one has, and let me just see if I can. No, I don't know of a way, but I'll play around with it if you want to email me. I'd be happy to kind of see if I could come up with a way of kind of copying the lengths of one notes. I'm sure there's a way to do it. I'm just kind of having a little brain cramp with it. Okay, so once again, I covered this a little earlier, but just can I use an iLock in order to upgrade Pro from Elements? So, Steinberg doesn't use the iLock system, so it uses the eLicenser. Okay, let's go through more comments. All right, so question, any tricks to make bass punch through a heavy rock mix? So let's take a look. I think I have a good example. I think that the built-in VST bass amp is really good. For like a rock thing, I would maybe, go straight for the Ampeg model. And I have lots of Ampeg amps myself, probably too many. But let's say if I was... So let's say if I wanted this bass here. So, one of the things you may want to do is, EQ, boosting mid-range can really help. But let's say if I just want to take this and run it through the VST bass amp, and you'll see it's under distortion. So just kind of putting some mid-range in. And, check out different cabinets. I've always kind of been a 115 kind of guy for a lot of live stuff. But you could play around with some different cabinets here if you want the classic SVT. So those are some things I would try, but definitely try the VST bass amp. Play around with the Ampeg model of this one. I think it's the valve 300 watt valve amp. So it's pretty obvious what it's going for. But a lot of my rock producer friends love this and find that kind of their secret weapon for bass stuff to get it to sit in a mix without doing much. Okay, so just, all right, good to see Jazz Dude on a Hangout. So I see, hi, how can I extract acapella from a track to use them in a remix? So Cubase doesn't really have some, functionality for extracting different parts. I've seen some people do stuff with like spectral layers, but Cubase itself doesn't really have like a good way to extract individual components from a mix. Okay, so we have a question of inside folders versus outside folders. So let's say it's kind of a little bit of different terminology. So let's say if I select all of my drums here and I wanted to put it into a folder track. So I could just kind of come over here. We'll say move selected tracks to new folder, or we'll do it with a bus. So when I come here, we can say add group channel to selected channels. And we get this function where you can create inside folder or outside folder. So if we choose outside folder, we can think of this as directly below the last selected track. So I'll come here, we add that group, and it goes directly below the last track. If I choose outside folder, and we do the same function, if we choose inside folder, this goes into its own, when we look at this, we add the track. It's not below the last one, but it's going to be placed into a folder for group tracks. So all your group tracks, all of your effects tracks can go into their own folder, but you may want to just place the group directly to the right of the, directly to the right of the selection that you want. So outside of the folder means that it goes directly below the last selected track, and inside the folder means that it goes into a group folder or into an effects folder. Okay. Okay, so just see question, is there any way to invert the scroll horizontally? So scrolling down goes to the right as opposed to the left exclusively within Cubase. So I guess going like this, where maybe in the mixer or in the project window. I don't know of a way to just invert the mouse scroll wheel, but I think kind of makes sense that you kind of like where as you go to the top that you would go to the beginning of the selection, but I don't think there's a preference. I'll just take a quick look, but I think that might be fixed. Let me just take a look, maybe. Yeah, I don't think there's any preferences for that. So those are kind of fixed, but I think it's pretty, intuitive to like, go down to go later, scroll up to, but there's, all sorts of different views on like on web pages, whether you invert your mouse scroll wheel to go up or down as well. So. Okay, how to prevent Cubase key command conflicts with normal Mac key commands. Yeah, I think it's kind of annoying that Mac OS kind of takes over your function keys. But what you can do is just go on a Mac to your system, and then you just want to go to keyboard and click use F1, F2, etc. as standard function keys, and this way they won't kind of be overtaken, by like Mac OS functions once you're in Cubase. So you really don't need those Mac functions. But again, go to System Preferences, to Keyboard, and then just choose use F1, F2 as regular function keys. Yeah, I think it's a bit encroaching, taking your function keys away from programs by default. So just set that up and you should be good to go. Okay, my chat jumped on me. Just bear with me. Okay. Okay, so I have a question. Hey, Greg, you think you can show me how to use the node and tempo track that I was talking about in the email I sent you the other day? All right, so let's see if we can take a look at this. So let's say if I want to go to my tempo track here. So I'm just going to activate my tempo. So if I think what you wanted to do is, so if you just have like a tempo value here, so let's say, you just wanted to drop in that tempo value. So if we select this here, we can put that tempo node anywhere. But I think you notice on the very first one that it's going to be kind of just fixed to that particular spot. And let me just see if I hit Shift S, if we do display bar offset, if that makes any difference. So, if you do an offset here, so I just did where we had, I just kind of basically just kind of moved all of the tracks over to, but, as you kind of just come right over here, if you needed like the two measures, but you should be able to just kind of drop in your tempo node. And then be able to A, change the value, or B, change the position. But I think with the very first one, it might be fixed for position for the start time. So, but if you needed it, you could just simply put it directly in, do a display offset. So if you hit Shift S and then just put in like a 2-bar display offset, then you could have it start right at the position and be able to move those tempo nodes kind of as you expect. So let me know if that works for you. But I think that should help. Okay, so just seeing from Jay, so stereo always in bus name, can't avoid. So if you could let me know, so let's say if and this is going back to our question on the control room. So I see my, and I think it's going to work the same exact way in the window, but if you could let me know which bus name, and, it seems like when I come over, that, I can see my mono and stereo connections here. But maybe if you could let me know which bus name, Jay, that could be helpful. We should have time to get to it. Okay. Okay, so I just see a question from Tommy. How can I transport to the first and second markers when using numeric 1? Numeric 2 takes you to positions of the locator bar instead. So let's say if I have my markers set up here. So let's say I have my range selection and I have my markers. So, and I hit 1 on my numeric keypad, 2, that takes me to the left, right locator. I hit 1, 2 to the right locator. So 1's left locator, 2 is the right locator. So, okay, so it says it takes you to the positions of the locator bar instead. So this is just going directly to where the left and right locators are, not necessarily to the bar. So let's say if I'm in between, I hit 1 and then go to 2. It's just kind of going directly to those positions. So just let me know if I'm misunderstanding. But so 1 and 2 seems to be okay. So so I see kind of more from Jay says not in speakers in bus name. So I'm not sure if it's in the control room or if it's a bus like a group. But if we added a group channel, you should be able to have the group as mono as well, and then you could have a mono group. So just making sure, maybe I'm being dense with this question. But I think it's starting off just in the control room. It's not in speakers, but in the bus name. So we see our Q4 here. And let me just look to see if we go into like our mix console. And let me just add the Q sends in the rack. So here I can see my Q4, and I don't see, so I'm not sure what bus names, if it's the Qs, you said it's not the speakers. So maybe, Jay, I'm just being dense. I'm sorry if I'm misunderstanding. So we had some questions. We have a question: can you add your own samples with a picture to the loop and samples area? So these will be kind of factory done by Steinberg to have these. And I had asked previously, and they said that it wasn't available for users to do. But yeah, I've had a number of requests for it, so I'll see if there's a way that we could associate. I'm not sure what particular metadata there is, but currently it's not set up for users to have their own kind of user-defined tile for the loops and samples. But it could be one of those things that's not so hard to do and maybe just hasn't been implemented yet. But I'll reiterate the point. Okay, let's move on. Some different questions. I see someone who's maybe disappointed that it's in siempre en inglés, hagan algún directo en español. So my high school Spanish doesn't do well, but I think there's other people that use like translation, and once the hangout is done, I believe there's closed captioning that will show up in different languages as well. But I think there's other people that speak Spanish, maybe. So Sebastian, if you have a question that you could maybe ask, and I think Pablo uses kind of a translation tool to get questions answered or asked. But I'm sorry, I'm just kind of the quintessential stupid American who doesn't speak other languages well. So okay, so we have a question. Is there an inexpensive way to trigger macros on main Mac from a second computer PC, or could Steinberg consider developing such a protocol? Most of the macros are just triggered directly from keyboard shortcuts. So if you have an iPad, there's a number of programs that could fire off keyboard shortcuts. You could use the Cubase IC Pro app. I also have a Stream Deck. I think it's Elgato makes it, which fires off keyboard shortcuts as well. So that's a great system. So I'm not sure if it makes sense for Steinberg to really get into that. It's not necessarily our area of expertise. But there are a lot of different iPad apps that will fire off, and touchscreen apps. I know a lot of people that will use like Touch OSC and different utilities like that. But check out the Cubase IC Pro, because you can fire off macros and keyboard shortcuts. And if you're really dedicated to probably the most comprehensive might be the Stream Deck. Look into that, and that's a great system. I'm still kind of getting mine configured to do like way too much. Okay. In the empty region after clicking on a VST where presets are saved, if so, how do you add them to this area? Does this area include presets with effects or just presets from within the VST? So if you're doing like, presets within the VST, and I assume maybe it's the VST instrument, you can come over here. So let's say, okay, I just want it to, let's say I have this sound and I've modified it here. So, and if we save a preset, this preset is saved within as a preset for this instrument. Now, if I have that preset saved with a number of different processes going on, so let's say I have EQ, at that point I could save it as a track preset, and then that would recall the preset with all my insert EQs and my channel strip preserved. So you can kind of pick and choose which one you want to, how you want to work with it. All right. All right, so we have Max checking in from New York. All right, lots of discussion in Spanish. All right. So it says, thanks, Greg, for answering the first question. Is there a way to manually set warp markers on track? So if you wanted to, come here, I think if you go to, if you want to do hit points, so let's say, if I wanted to define hit points, I think, you could come over here and hold down, like, let's see if I remember the modifier key. Let me find something a little more rhythmic. So I think if you wanted to, let me just come over here and say edit hit points. And then if you wanted to hold down your Alt or Option key, you can just click here and add different hit points. And I think the same would go through for, if you wanted to do kind of warp markers. So if you come here, you could just put in free warp. And now, if you say, okay, I want this, so if you wanted to erase warp markers or just say, I want to just click and say, okay, I don't want to move that, but I want to move this. And, you can say, now I want to move this without affecting either of those. So if I'm in this scenario and I wanted to move this one, but not move this, you just click with the mouse and now I could adjust the position of those while leaving other ones kind of anchored. So just kind of click, once you're into free warp, once you have that active, or just from markers, holding down Alt or Option. I think same question we had earlier. Can you copy hit points to another track that has different audio without linking? I.e., copy guitar hit points to mod audio. So I think they would have to be linked or grouped for that to happen, as we showed earlier. Okay, so it says, for some reason, there is no audio when I demo my own samples from the media bay. Wondering if there's a quick fix for that. So let's say if you wanted to audition, different samples here. So if you hear that, it could be that you need to set up the control room. So let's go to your audio connections. And if I don't have my control room configured and I have my outputs set here, now when I go to audition in my media bay, I don't hear, because this kind of goes through what's called the listen bus. And I don't think it's probably well documented, but so if I go to my audio connections, and what I want to do is on the outputs have my outputs defined for monitoring but set to not connected, and go to my control room and have my monitor defined there. Now I could audition all my different loops just like that. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. How can crossfades work if there are no overlaps, such as when whole measures of audio are removed and remaining sections? So when whole measures of audio are removed and remaining sections come together, not to mention sudden arranger track moves. So, crossfades, by name would have to have like two events that are overlapping or are right next to each other. So if you, like, let's say if I cut like right in the middle of a particular edit here. So let's say I cut right there. And as we're doing this, and they're slightly overlapping. So there I would just hit the X key and that would do a crossfade. Now, if these two events were cut and just kind of right next to each other, we could hit the X key and that would kind of extend the crossfade even though they weren't overlapping of the events. Now, what you may want to have set up, especially if you have like different parts jumping around in an arranger track, is you'll see on the audio events here, there's this little function called the X, and this is an auto fade setting. So on playback, you could automatically have every single clip, do a slight fade in or fade out or auto crossfades. And this isn't written into the file or edited into the file, but just for playback purposes. So if if you're having like, your arranger that's kind of jumping around and maybe you're hearing some pops and clicks, you may want to just simply activate auto fades by default, and that should automatically play back. That will automatically play back fades at the beginning or end of the clip, so that you can minimize any clicks and pops as opposed, from a bad edit. Okay, so just reading through comments. All right. Hello, Greg. Everyone, question. Can you cover some on making adjustments like pitch correction on a live track for vocal or guitar? Also, maybe helpful is to not keep turning on and off monitor in live. So if it's, if you wanted to actually, do, on input, what you may want to have, and this plugin may cause just some latency. Let me just go to a project that has some vocals in it. So now So when I wanted to do this, so one of the plugins that you could have if you're doing live, and if you wanted to apply pitch correction live, which is probably not something I would recommend, you could come over here and go to the pitch shift plugin, and under pitch shift, there's a pitch correct plugin. So you could do that, but let me just check to see what the latency is on that particular plugin. This may be a little high, but we'll just check. So that's about 40 milliseconds of latency for that plugin. So, generally what I would always recommend doing, is not to do pitch correction live, but to do the editing after the fact if you can. If you're doing kind of a live broadcast, I would, work with, directly, maybe just have the pitch shift plugin here turned on, but that could, impose, 40 milliseconds of latency, like a lot of live pitch shifting algorithms. But if we're here on it, now we could go directly to, if we go directly into our VaryAudio editor, here we have tremendous control kind of after the fact. If we're doing all of your pitch correction in the system, where you could select kind of entire regions and just say I want to straighten the pitch, that easily. You could see different color schemes, so that different you could judge by the chord track, and if you wanted to just select particular ranges here, you could also just say I wanted to minimize vibrato on selected notes or selected regions of notes as well. So you could say, now I just wanted to not affect the transitions, but to minimize vibrato in the middle. So lots of great functions that could be done there, but I'm not sure if you wanted to do it on live on input, which I know some people want for their pitch correction, but ideally I would record it and then fix it after. But if it's for like a live broadcast, I would use the pitch correct plugin. So. Okay, I've built a new template in Cubase 10.5. What would be the best way to implement it in a project that I have already started using an old template? What I would do is, open up the template and save like an empty version of it. And then I would probably come right over here and just do an import. And so, so it mentions you have 10.5, and we will say, I want to import tracks from project. You could select all of the different tracks. You could have it go to a new track, or you could pick different destination tracks and just have it, not import the events and parts. And this way you could say, I want to take that. So I would incorporate that by just going and import, save it as a project and go to import tracks from project and carry over the files that way. Okay, so just see question, how to convert audio to MIDI in Cubase. So if I have like a vocal part, and this works for monophonic audio. So once I'm here, I could choose, and it's done the analysis of my vocal part. If you go to functions, you could just say extract MIDI information. So that's probably the most reliable way of doing that. So from within VaryAudio for monophonic audio, just go to functions and choose to extract MIDI. Okay. Okay, so it says, hi, Greg, I was wondering, is it legal, okay, to sample anything? To what length? To use any way? it could really depend, if it's going to be something that someone else has created. I think if someone is talking on the street and you recorded them, or you recorded a car driving by, that, I don't think the person driving the car could, I think that's kind of in the public domain, from many, many years ago when I was, a music industry major in college. I remember it was and this was kind of right as sampling was, becoming an issue, an illegal issue. At that point, kind of the rule of thumb was, if it's a recognizable part, but if it's the melody or the lyrics, those are things that are kind of generally, thought of as being, if it was recognizable from, another work, you could do that. But I'm not a legal scholar, and this is kind of changing all the time, especially recently with like the Robin Thicke song, so there's, with that case, that kind of broke some new precedent in that regard. But I'm not an expert in it, but, try not to, sample from any any material that's under copyright. That's always a good way to think of it as well. But I'm not a legal expert and haven't studied it in a while. Okay. Okay. So just saying question. Okay. So it's from Harry Sam. I have some problem in the Cubase chord track. I hope you can help me. It says root key is changing perfectly on upside, where all these listed root key type and harmonic shift voicing. But the type of scales is stuck and not changing. I don't know why. It's frustrating. So if you have, let's say if we have a chord track, let's say if we have our scale set here, you may have to, on the chord track, just deactivate automatic scales. And then, you could double click. So once that is deactivated, you should be able to kind of change your scales accordingly. But if that is checked, you won't be able to have any other choices. So, make sure that, when you select a chord track, you'll see automatic scales. Try to uncheck that. And but that's what I would do. And I think that you should be able to change the scales as you see fit. Okay. How am I able to nudge MIDI or audio other than by full bars or quarter notes? It immediately snaps to either of these two, depending if I set the grid to bar beat. So if you have an event here, so let's say, okay, I want to take this and nudge it, so as we do our nudging, and if you don't see the nudging, we can come right over here. Let's open up the nudge palette. So when you go to our grid, we could just choose to use quantize. And at this point, let's say if I have my quantize value set, let me just... So let's say my quantized value is now set to, eighth notes. So now when I come right over here, I could just nudge. We'll just zoom out here. So now it'll just nudge by eighth notes. If I want this to be, 16th note triplets, I could come directly here and say, okay, I want this to be 16th note triplets. And as I nudge, just holding control and the arrows, it will just do it'll nudge by those various values. So you can, instead of using bar or beat, just choose to use quantize, and then you could nudge in basically whatever rhythmic interval that you'd like to. Okay, so we see how can I change the key across the track. We don't necessarily, we could transpose. So let's say if I wanted to come here, I'll just revert this quickly. Thanks for all the great questions. Hope everyone's learning something new. If you've learned a new tip or trick, please feel free to, give a thumbs up. And also just to, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, feel free to do that. So let's say if I'm here, and I may not want certain tracks to transpose, let's say like all of my drums. So I will come here and we say global transpose. I'm going to set those two events to independent. And so while I'm playing, if I did everything right, I'll start here and I'm going to add a transpose track. So let's say I'll come right here and I want to transpose up a whole step. Up until then, I was okay. I still have a drum somewhere. Anyway, but that's kind of like the idea that all you have to do is you could set your drum tracks directly to not follow, but the rest of them can come over here, and then you could just transpose up or down by semitones here. So you could use a transpose track for that. And if I wanted to jump to something that was, let's just say, all audio, I'll just come here and let's add a transpose track. So here I won't transpose my drums. So I'll set these to global transpose to independent. So let's say I'll set this to 2. And then you could just have your tracks transpose kind of just like that. So it's not going to do like from major to minor or, minor to Mixolydian, but you can take all of your audio and just and transpose it up. Okay, so we have a question from Giles Danger. Hello, Greg. About aggregate devices. Is it supported in Cubase? If I can see the aggregate but no sound coming in, Steinberg forum seems to announce that it is not possible with Cubase. Yeah, you could definitely do it, but you need to, first off, make sure that when you go to your studio setup and you go to your VST audio system, that you have your aggregate device selected here, and then all you have to do is just to select the various input and output, wherever you want it, stuff routed to between your different devices. So the aggregate devices only works on Mac, and within Windows there's no support for aggregate devices, but as you do an aggregate device, realize that you're going to have compounded latency, so your latency may increase, but Cubase supports it, no problems. Okay. Okay, so I see question. Can you do a Q&A with Greg Ondo video and Spectral layers as part of that series? I bought Pro 6 version this weekend, and I wanted to integrate it as an essential part of Cubase. Any help is appreciated. I think, one of my colleagues, Michael, he does some of the Spectral layers hangouts, and I think they're planning another one. They did one maybe a month ago. So there's kind of a whole series of Spectral layers hangouts in addition to what I do, and in addition to John Barron's Discovered Dorico series. So, but there are some of those. And I think there might be some new stuff. So if you watch that, Mike kind of alluded to some new things happening that seem really interesting. So, there are other people that do hangouts for Steinberg as well. So. Okay, so it says, okay, Greg, I have a question. How do I make the world's best song ever in Cubase? Don't overthink it, So, we wish we had the magic, make a hit button. But, it's been successful for a lot of people. All right. Okay, so this is question. I still seem to be missing all I can do with the range selection. How can I enable fade in, fade out? How can I use a delay on a specific part of recording for, say, like a vocal and just not the whole track? Okay, so let's take a look. Let's make something a little bigger here. So let's say we're here and I just wanted to... Let's say I use my range selection tool. So if I split here, and I think it's just Shift X, that will automatically create kind of its own region. And then once we do that, like if I move my cursor here, you could just hit, so at this point we could just, do your fades like so. So again, just select a range with the range selection tool, hit Shift X, and then you're able to, just come right over here and be able to do, your various, fade handles. If you wanted to just select a particular range here within a part, you could just hit, so if I wanted to, if you didn't want to do the fade handles, so let's come over here. Let's just say I take this, I do a Shift X, or if I wanted to, or without even doing that, if I wanted to just select the beginning, I could just hit the A, and then you could, like within a particular range, let me just close this out. Sorry, make it confusing. So if I do a Shift X to cut, and then if I say, okay, I just wanted to take this range at the beginning, I could hit A, and you could just do, various, and that will do like fade to range. So I could say, that will do a fade in until that point. Or I could say, okay, we're going to select this and let's do a fade out to that point, or a fade in. So let's say I come here and I Shift X, and then I have that, and now I select in the middle. I could just hit A, and that's adjust fades to range, and that will automatically just do fade ins and fade outs right there. So that's a handy thing. So I'll split here, and then in the middle, I want to fade in and out, hit A. And then your fades will be handled. If I wanted to take just like a part and just do processing on it, so let's say, right where the guitar does their little end. So I could just take that particular range and hit F7, or go to your audio menu to direct offline processing. So, and now I could say I just wanted to, and I'll just come right over here. So let's say we'll just select that part there, and let's add a plugin. So I just want to put in a delay. So let's say I just put in a stereo delay, and that will now render that file. So that way that's kind of burned in. And if I wanted to say, okay, let's just throw in, and even after that's been done, I could just delete. And if I wanted to, at any time, let's just throw in a quick modulation. So let's say I just want to throw a flanger just on that part. So at that point, we just play back the file. And then it's just going to go kind of right back to where you were. So that way you could just do that one particular range. So that's a couple of tips and tricks for working with the range selection tool. So I hope that helps with doing some fades and stuff. All right. Okay, just okay, so let's see. All right, let's see if there's any truth in the expression third time's a charm. How do I use VST Amp Rack or any Steinberg plugins with VST Connect Pro? They are not installed at the performer. So let me see if I have performer installed. I don't think I have the VST Connect performer, but if you want, Sven, I could have it installed for the Hangout on Friday. I don't have it on this machine. I have it on my other machine. So, but we'll take a look at that. Okay, so a question from Charles. I have a question. Explain buses and when and why they're needed. So a lot of times if you're running a lot of different tracks in a project, having one fader as opposed to multiple faders can simplify things. So if you have a lot of drum tracks, so let's say I'm here and I have lots of drums. So what I could do is select all these tracks. I'll right click and I'm going to add a group channel to the selected, and we'll make it a stereo. So now this group channel controls the volume of all of my drums. And now if I wanted to apply just an EQ across all of my drums collectively, or compressor, so this way I could, instead of doing this on every single track, I could just do it on one track and be able to kind of say, okay, I want to adjust the volume of all my drums, all my guitars, all my vocals through one fader, and maybe individually adjust when needed. So those are some of the reasons why you'd want to have a like a bus or group channel. Okay, we have a question. How can I set up a Yamaha DTX12 drum pad with Cubase Pro? Thanks. So, it's just outputs MIDI data. So, once you have, I think it's going to connect via MIDI cable or via USB. I had one for a little bit when they were first released. So, and then it's just going to, just like a typical MIDI controller, you'll see kind of MIDI data coming in and out here. And to get that mapped to something like Groove Agent, which is a question we get a lot, You know, if you wanted to just, you know, freely, like when I hit this zone or hit this pad, it outputs to and triggers these MIDI notes. If you click below this little drum icon right here, below the lower right-hand pad, and activate that. Once you've done that, you could just right-click and say Edit Learn Trigger Note. Do that and then hit the pad, and that will assign that pad's MIDI note to trigger. So if you have like a bass drum pedal that's going into that, or if you have, you know, whatever, you could just simply hit the pad, and that will automatically send that MIDI note and assign that MIDI note directly to the sounds as they're selected. But you need to have, it's pretty subtle, like for Groove Agent, just to have that on. But other than that, it's just a simple MIDI controller that's, as you hit the pads, it's transmitting MIDI messages, and you could assign that to any instrument or MIDI track in Cubase quite easily. Okay, let's move on. Thanks for all great questions. Okay, seeing other people loving that use the bass amp. Oh well. Okay, so we have a question: what's the best settings step for rap music? So you know, you could, you know, if you're just kind of programming different elements for beats, you know, there's, you know, it's always hard to have a, you know, follow these steps and have a song. But, you know, like a lot of times, you know, if you're working with different, you know, drum devices, you can come over here. So there's different kits that come with Groove Agent. So, you know, let's say if I wanted to come over here. You know, so, and then there's a MIDI plugin. So if you go to like MIDI inserts for that Groove Agent track, you can come right over here and open up Beat Designer. And then what Beat Designer will allow you to do is to actually just kind of program different beats. So I will just kind of come here. Let's just solo this track here. So you could have different velocities, you could audition. I'm the world's worst beat programmer, but and then if you want to put in different flams as well. So, you know, you could make a beat kind of just like that. And then if you wanted to, you know, import that, you could just say, you know, let's just drag that pattern and place it at the cursor or place it at the beginning of the track. So, you know, you could just simply, you know, drag and drop and have those beats directly in your project and just kind of come over there. So that's like, you know, how you could start working with a drum beat quite easily. All right, so we have Paulie checking in from Arizona. All right, good to see Creed on a Hangout. Okay. So I see from Alchemy Audio, hey Greg, can you use VaryAudio to identify the key of a song? Yeah, there's a couple different ways of doing it. So let's say if you have like a bass part, especially here. So I will double click. So even though this is instrumental, I could just go to VaryAudio. And we can have it do its pitch correction. So we'll have it do its detection. So I could pretty much probably figure out kind of what the key is of the song based on this. So let's say as we're going along. So I will. So that sounds like my tonal point of the song. So just kind of coming over here, we could see that this song is probably, as we look at the particular pitch here, you could just see that this song is, and just kind of look at the pitch here. So we would say this is probably in the key of A because this is kind of where the tonic of the bass part is. So it's not foolproof. It's not going to automatically, tell you, you're in A, A Mixolydian or F Phrygian, but you could kind of use the VaryAudio to figure out what the pitches are if you don't know what it is for editing. Okay, sorry, my chat line jumped again. Let me see. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, let me just kind of scroll back. Sorry, you could just bear with me. Okay. Okay, just reading through different comments. All right, so we see how to add a key signature track. So, when you go to the chord track, you can just carry this over. So let's say, if you go to, and here you're able to define. So let's say if we have, we want this to be an A, we could show the scales directly here. So you're able to kind of see the scales. But when we go into a score editor, let's just add a quick instrument track. And if you wanted to do it in the notation view, we'll come over here. So that doesn't carry over. But if we wanted to just double click, and if you go to the staff, and this would open up your score settings, and you could access this directly from your scores menu as well. But just go to your settings, and then if you want to see it in the score editor, you could come here and it just set the key for the score editor. So. Okay, just reading through comments. All right, we have Ambient Dave on the Hangout. He's probably been on for a long time, and I'm just behind. Good to see you, Dave. Hope you're doing well. So we see a question. Hey, Greg, is there a way to create impulse responses in Cubase or maybe a process? So there's not kind of an automated process because it's going to need to be sent out somewhere. But if you wanted to, if you wanted to actually send the impulse, you could generate it from the reverence, convolution reverb. So I'll just add an effects channel track and let's switch this over to reverb. And often what you need is just an actual impulse to trigger the response. So we'll go to reverence here, and within reverence, there's going to be just an actual where you could listen to, and I'll just turn this up so it's maybe a little easier to hear. So if I click just on this particular icon here, we could listen to just the impulse itself. And if I wanted to browse through, different, so say if I go to ballroom here and I listen to the impulse, so this allows us to kind of audition to see what the room would sound like. So let's say we go to an Austrian concert hall. But if we take this down here, what you could do is just send this out to an output on your track. And as we would kind of click here, so let's say we want the level up, but the mix set to 0%. So now you could just hit play and then send that into your reverberant space and record a WAV file. And then you can come right over here and just choose to import any standard WAV file directly into, and that's would just be an impulse response as a standard wave. So open up your reverence and then just trigger the actual the actual impulse button and record the results. So it's not an automated thing, but it's pretty easy to do. Okay. Just going through different questions. A lot of people saying hi to Ambient Dave. He's a popular guy in Hangouts. So, maybe I see Jay just it says bus name, stereo. Maybe if you could email me if you want to send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de, I could see if I could take a quick look and see exactly what you're talking about, so I don't waste your time with that. Okay, so just seeing, does anybody know does anyone know about setting up a Yamaha Motif XF? So, once you kind of have this set up, it's really, you just kind of set it up as as a MIDI driver. And let me just see if the Motif has, so I will come here directly to more options under Studio. You go to your MIDI device manager, and then once you have this, you could just say I want to install a device, and you could just kind of come right over here. So you go to Motif XF, you tell it where it's connected to in your let's say it's connected to my panorama, and now I would go to add a MIDI track. All right, I come here, I choose that this is going to be going to my Motif XF, and now I can click here and I can see all the patch names for your Motif, just laid out for you just like that. So again, go to your devices or studio menu to more options, to MIDI device manager, and you want to just install a device, tell it where it's going, select your Motif XF7 or Motif XF, and then you should have access to all your patch names. Okay, so just see a question from where is the stream happening, because he's clearly not reading our comments. So, again, as we mentioned earlier, we try to go through all the different comments as they come in. So it's, pretty impossible to keep up and answer all the questions in real time. So we go through them, as we do this, we go through them chronologically, as we mentioned earlier. So. Okay. I think my son is knocking on the door. I may have to set up a new movie for him. Just bear with me real quick. I'll be right back. Thank you. All right, I'm back. Sorry about the interruption, but my son's watching the Brady Bunch now, so we should be uninterrupted for a couple hours, I think. So I have a question. Would you recommend adding an analog mixer to an audio interface? What would be the best way to incorporate it effectively and productively? Thanks, Greg. It really depends on your needs. I see a lot of people that have large MIDI rigs, like older MIDI rigs, like of hardware, and having a mixer to having a mixer to take the audio outputs of that and be able to monitor it and mix it, makes a lot of sense. I think, if you're doing, recording yourself playing guitar or keyboards and singing, that most audio interfaces have mic preamps and that the mixer really isn't needed and can be a little superfluous. I mean, in my setup, I have, 23 external sound modules, older MIDI stuff. And I have those going into like two Mackie 3204 mixers. So I have 64 analog ins. And then I take like a bus out of that mixer into my audio interface if I need to record those as audio, from a MIDI sequence. So it really depends on your workflow. So if you have a lot of, MIDI keyboards and drum machines and synths, having a mixer to combine all those will definitely, be to make a lot of sense. Sometimes people think that, they're getting a magic sound just by running through an analog mixer. And, a lot of times it doesn't really pan out. It's could be a bit more aspirational and could cause a lot of, issues overall, and especially doing recalls. So, but if you love the sound of a particular mixer in your voice or guitar, you can, go for it. But if you were just recording yourself, I would maybe have a hard time justifying to myself buying a mixer just for that, with the quality of mic pre's that come with and the processing that comes in programs like Cubase. Okay, so I see question. Why is it every other time I'm loading Cubase, it goes through all the Windows applications just to load? Seems to be every other time. Also, the new 10.5 plugin report shows up every other time as well. You probably have a plugin that's causing Cubase to crash on exit, and that's why it's doing that for you, to kind of give you a heads up that something is causing system instabilities. So that's why it's I'm not sure why it's, when you say it goes through all Windows applications just to load. So it's because something is causing your Cubase to crash and make it unstable that it's doing that. So. Okay, so how do you map a plugin's controllers to a MIDI controller when there is no Learn CC option? So, great question. So let's say if I'm here, and let's just put like a quick plugin on, which may not have a MIDI Learn. So say I want to throw in a chopper plugin. So there's no MIDI Learn on this particular function. And if I wanted to control this with a MIDI slider, what I could do is come over here. We'll go to our studio setup, and then we have, our track quick controls, and we could use 8 sliders that we've configured. So we could just come over here and say Learn, move the slider, and that will do our quick control there. Now, as we work with quick controls, we can come right over here. We can activate it. And then I'll say on this particular track, I want it to go to inserts, insert 1, chopper. And let's say I just wanted to change the depth. So now that fader is automatically just controlling the depth. So once you have these 8 quick controls, you could also come over here and let's say if I wanted to select slot 2 here, you could click on Learn. So say we select that slot, and I come here and adjust that parameter, and now speed is controlled from my quick control. So you could actually just on the parameters, once you have those 8 sliders set up as quick controls, all you have to do is just come right over here, click on Learn, select a slot that you want it to be in, and now you could just come right there, and that's controlling that particular parameter just that easily. So, open it up, go to your quick controls, click on Learn, move the parameter, and that will be assigned to your quick controls, and you leave those 8 quick controls set up, and you could just do that quickly for all of your functions. Okay, question from Paulie D. Thanks to you, I now know how to move the stereo input and output faders. on the mixer to the right, is there a way to make the input fader completely go away? I use all virtual instruments. I don't need it. So let's say if I come over here, and there's a couple ways. So if I have a number of input channels here, and after I've tracked and I'm mixing, or if you're using all virtual instruments like the question asked, you probably don't need to see all of your inputs. So we could do it a couple different ways. One is there's a channel filter type. So in the lower zone mixer, we could come right over here and just say, don't show input channels, or don't show MIDI or sampler channels. So you could pick to filter out specific channel types. And if we go into our larger mix console, we just see that just to the right of configurations here. And there I could hide my input channel. So once you do that, then you could hide the channels by type, just like that. Okay. All right, just going through comments. Thanks for all the great comments. All right. So we see, when will bugs with SoftTube plugins be fixed? We're probably not the best people to ask. So generally, if plugins are causing problems, it's not Cubase's implementation. So you may be best talking to SoftTube about that. We don't really have control over when they have their plugins being fixed. Okay, so just see question: is there any way to set tempo from a click in real time? So if we're here, so it depends, if you wanted to come directly to, if you wanted to do it in real time while it's playing, or if you wanted to just be able to kind of tap the tempo in, there's a couple of different ways of doing it. One is if you go to project to beat calculator, you can come right over here and just click on tap tempo and hit your space bar. And that will give you an idea. So you could do that and then have that at the tempo track start, or place it at the current position of the song if you wanted to. If you record, let's say I just come here and while it's playing, I wanted to record just MIDI tracks, MIDI notes here. So I just kind of hit on a quarter note. So I could take just that particular MIDI recording here, go to MIDI, and I think under functions, you'll see merge tempo from tapping. You say I did this as quarter notes, and it could automatically make a tempo map for you. And you could also just select an event and have Cubase from the project menu just do a tempo detection. So I'm not sure if you need real time, like while it's recording, to do it, or so there's different concepts of what real time is in this way. Okay, so we have a question: hit point versus warp marker. What's the difference? So once we're in like an event here, so hit points will always be kind of more rhythmically significant. So we're trying to find like the transient of, let me just do it on a drum part here, which would make more sense. So here what we want to do is to find, by a certain threshold, kind of different rhythmic points here. So in this way we could slice based upon those, we could quantize based off of those. And we could have, different modes of detection, whether, we do it by threshold, by grid. And when we go into like warp markers, this is going to be primarily, for being able to move different components, as we see fit. So warp markers aren't necessarily, going to be added. You could, I think, take hit points and create markers based on those, or create warp markers based on the hit points. And then when you come here, be able to kind of freely move them around as well. So you think of the warp markers more for kind of rhythmically moving different aspects to change the timing. If the guitarist was a little early or late, or the kick was just off, the vocalist came in off time, you could just take one word and just kind of move it ever so slightly and have it fit. And that's what kind of the warp markers are intended for. So yeah, question. Some VST effects have built-in crossfade. How do I know what channels are being crossfaded, or should I just set up my own crossfading between channels? I know some effects may kind of fade in and fade out, but it's not necessarily doing. I don't know of any, and I could be mistaken, but none come to my mind that actually do crossfades on the audio itself. So I think that's something. So I'm just seeing, sometimes you'll have samples, like samplers will crossfade between different samples. So I'm not sure which VST effects. Maybe if you could specify, we may catch it before the end of the Hangout. Okay. Okay, so it says, I just see a comment, and I cannot get Cubase 10.5 Pro to clock from MIDI. So if you're doing MIDI clock, so Cubase isn't going to respond to MIDI clock, because MIDI clock isn't, and we would do this in the project synchronization setup. MIDI clock won't have the resolution needed to synchronize digital audio. So what you want to have is Cubase as the master that sends MIDI clock out to your device. MIDI clock itself is actually pretty crude in resolution compared to what's needed to properly synchronize and clock digital audio. So that's why it's not going to be the master. So Cubase would be the master, and you would send MIDI clock through the MIDI clock destination to device, and have that device set to listen to external clock, and then you could synchronize it too. But that's why, because it's the audio is going to have way more requirements of a higher precision than you're going to get from MIDI clock than MIDI clock can actually provide. Okay. So I see a question. New to Cubase, can you set it up so one track only ever goes into record? Enable mode. Often I'm finding a MIDI track out of view is still in record. Only want one track at a time in record and enable. So there's some preferences to be aware of. So if we come over here to editing, and I think if we go to project and mix console, here you could say, enable record, on selected MIDI channels. So, that may be a preference that could help you initially. And then that way, as soon as, we have, let's see, I'll just add a couple instrument tracks here. So as I'm here, as I select my different channels, that's the only one that's going to be kind of record enabled by default, unless I specifically come over here and tell it to record. So that may be a good working methodology. And again, that preference. So go to preferences, to editing, project and mix console, and just say enable record on selected MIDI track. Question, where on Mac are the expression maps stored? Let's see if we could figure it out really quick. So think it might just be under preferences. Let me just take a quick look, see if I could find it. All right, so let me just... Let's see, these are different presets. Let me just see if it's... I'm just looking at my library, my Cubase preferences. Okay, so let's see if we can... See if we can find this in here. I may have to look for it offline, but I think it's going to be in the preferences. Yeah, so I could take a look if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. I can see if I can find just the exact preference where the presets are stored. So I just see a quick question. Pitch shift isn't working. So let me just take a look. Say if I wanted to take this file, I just want to check, see if it's offline. So I will just select this file and let me just go to my direct offline processing, or I'll go to processes to pitch shift. And let me just transpose it down. All right, and it's processing it here. All right, so now it looks like the processing is done. So it looks like the pitch shift is working there, but if it's somewhere else, just let me know if I'm looking in the wrong spot. All right, so we got Jay checking in from Netherlands. All right, so just on the pitch shift, so, when you go to audio processes, there's no pitch shift. So it seems like it's working as expected here. So just see the pitch shift, but maybe if you could indicate which version, that you're running, but it seems like it's working as expected and visible as you saw. Okay, so this is from Andrew. Greeting from Austria, new to Cubase. I have difficulties with plugins. So yeah, maybe if you could let us know what plugins are having difficulty. Okay. So seeing a nice comment from Scambot Terminator. Greg, I've been watching for the last 4 months in Hangouts. You have covered just about everything, but sometimes I forget things as there's so much to learn. Thank you so much for your patience with us. I forget stuff too all the time, as you probably noticed during the Hangouts. But yeah, it's an incredibly deep program, so don't feel bad. As long as you get work done, it's good. So. Okay, just reading through different comments. Okay, so I just see from Scambot, how do I transpose a specific part in a track to a higher or lower key without transposing the whole recording? So just kind of like what we did here. Let's say I want to take this guitar here, and I just want to take one phrase of the guitar. I'll just kind of select my range tool here. Just select that range. I go to audio to processes, to pitch shift. And I'll say, let's just go up a semitone. And then it's going to go ahead and just process that offline. And we listen to it now. And you can hear where the horrible transposition happened. We'll just do the two guitars together. So one is transposed, one isn't. So that's all you have to do is just kind of select it. And then just go to your audio to processes. And you could just do your pitch shift there. So you could just do it on one single one. And then, the cool thing with the direct offline processes is be able to delete it even after saving the project. So now you could listen to it. It'll be two different parts, and it'll go back directly to the original file. All right, Gareth K. Music says, Greg, revelation of the day, transpose. You got me, well done. Well, I feel complete because I gave Gareth a new feature that he wasn't so aware of. So that's my goal in Hangouts. Can we mix a Lydian? That's good. All right. And someone else liking the transpose. All right, so we're having musical modal humor here. All right. All right, so will the tool buttons ever be possible to colorize up to the menu place at the right click? It's a wanted option, all buttons with different colors option. So I haven't seen a request for that, but I'll include it in some of my notes. All right, our modal puns are getting worse. All right. All right, 2 revelations for Gareth with the fades, hitting A for adjust to range. So, yeah, and comments like with the direct offline processing, probably so this is how we edit particular parts in our track. So, yeah. Okay. So it says, Greg, I've got a question. Is the pitch shift option only under audio process only in Cubase Pro? It's not shown in the Cubase version comparison. I think it's part of the offline processes or direct offline processing. So I think it might be limited to Pro. So, but if you have a lesser version, that could be why you're not seeing it there. Okay. Okay. So difference between bus and group channel, really kind of they're the same. So just kind of different terminology. Some programs use buses, some, it goes, some consoles used to use buses and some would use groups and, so it's really, they're the same thing, just kind of different terminology. Okay. Okay, so see questions. Hi, how can I isolate vocal from background music? There's some people doing some spectral tasks. Hang on just one second. My son's knocking on the door. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. Okay, so we had a question. Hi, how can I isolate a vocal from background music? So currently, there's some interesting stuff going on with some spectral editing, but it's really hard to kind of take the vocal out of music. But, check out, some people are doing really interesting stuff with spectral layers. So kind of, keep your ears open for, some potential developments with that. And I think I left my mouse in the other room. Bear with me. Sorry, my son took my mouse. All right, so let's move on. So just seeing a question, why SE and Cubase Pro, by the way, so sometimes what we do is some of the instruments like Howling and Sonic SE, Groove Agent, SE is to kind of give starter editions that come with Cubase, so you can have a lot of functionality. And then if you need more advanced functions, you can get the full versions as well. Okay, so see, question, is there a way to move the ruler track? I'm thinking slide it right when I want to measure the time between sections, etc. So the ruler track is a static representation of the time. So let's take a look at a ruler track. So the ruler track will allow you to have, several, if I want to see my time here in bars and beats, but I wanted to see my time in seconds. So it's not really something that moves, it's just showing you a representation. So let's say this, I want it to be simply time code. If you wanted to determine the length between two events, you could just select the range, or you could select like the event here, and you'll see the length indicated, and you could switch between different time formats. So if I hit the period key, I could see that the length of this part is, and that will exchange between my primary and secondary time position. So I have my primary set up as bars and beats, my secondary set up as seconds. So if you select and you look in the info line, you could just see the length of the event, and it's going to be based in whatever the primary time display is. So that would be 17.813 seconds. So if I wanted to select a range, you could also see the range length indicated in time here. So that's why, the ruler track isn't an object that could be moved, but it's just showing you, time in different divisions. But if you're looking to just figure out what the length between regions are, or what the length is for other events, you could do it just like that. So just seeing a question from Charles, do I have to set up a different port for each song? And maybe this is going back to okay, so sorry if I miss this. Explain ports. I always get the message ports been used exclusively. Do I have to set up a different port for each song? So it could be in the audio connections, like if we have this set up where I want my outputs here to be set being routed out, and I want it. So I think you may get this message, and that's because that connection has been used somewhere else. And if you get that message and you kind of want it to be used in two different places, if we go to preferences and let's go to, I think it's maybe under control room, you could uncheck exclusive device ports for monitor channels. So if you uncheck that preferences, so go to Cubase preferences, VST to control room, and uncheck exclusive device ports. Now, if we uncheck that and we go to our VST connections, again, so I go to my output ports, I could set these and have them doubly bust. So if you get that ports message, you could just change that preference, but that will be sending the signal out twice, so that may not be a good idea, which is why they have that preference on by default. Just saying, Gareth referring to me as Greg Master Flash. I've worked with Grandmaster Flash and his Cubase stuff for a number of years, so I like the reference here. All right. All right. So just seeing people, figure out that there's a beat maker, like the little beat thing. All right. So again, Greg Y, SE and Cubase Pro. I don't like or use SE. If it has SE in the title, I wouldn't be so worried if it has SE in the title. If it, solves a problem and gets your work done, and it, I wouldn't not use it because it has SE in the title. Like if it's for Groove Agent or Hallion Sonic SE, those things work, incredibly well. Okay. Okay, just going through. All right, I know we had some questions that were sent in advance, so let's go ahead through some of those. I think I may be caught up for once, but I'm probably not. Okay, let's see before we do that. Okay, so you see from Charles, so do I have to set up a different port or just ignore it? You could ignore it, but realize that, you may be sending the audio out twice. So, if you have the extra ports to do, you could definitely use that as well. So I see a question from Clive. Hi, Greg. Do I need Wavelab or can Nuendo do the job for mastering? I know mastering engineers that do stuff in Nuendo, but, Wavelab is really kind of, for different mastering tasks, really a very kind of appropriate tool. So, we have people, and it could really depend upon your, what your definition of mastering is. So sometimes people will figure out that, sometimes people feel the mastering is just running the, running like a limiter and an EQ and maybe a multiband compressor on the master bus. And if that's what mastering is to you, which is fine and valid, then Cubase and Nuendo will do that beautifully. If you wanted to, make sure that all your tracks are the same loudness by a specific dB and loudness units, have more extensive metering, do metadata for multiple formats, being able to do, batch encoding, batch processing very, thoroughly, be able to burn, CDs and all the metadata, and be able to say, I wanted to take one particular file and export it to multiple formats at once. Then Wavelab, will handle those tasks very well. So, okay. Okay, so it says, Greg, can you explain the tempo detect function, and can that be applied to the whole track? Certainly. So let me just open up a project here. Sorry if you hear the Brady Bunch in the background. My son's watching. All right. So let me just... Okay, so let's say if I have a project that wasn't recorded to a click track. So we turn on a click track. So there's no correlation between the click track and what's going on musically. So, but let's say I want to make edits that are based upon the grid. So there's no correlation between the audio and the grid, kind of a fundamental problem. So I'm going to just take maybe my overhead tracks here and select it, and I'll go to my project menu, and let's do a tempo detection. So we'll analyze the audio file here. And now as we do this, so it's created a tempo map based upon the music. So I will come over here. I'm just going to move my tempo track to the top. And it's figured out basically like on the beat. So as we do this, so we'll just come here, and it's placed into like a 1/4 meter. So if I wanted to actually define where the downbeat is of the project, I will come here. Let's just make my tempo, just set the range here. So right there is going to be the downbeat, and just listening to it it's in 4/4 time. So I'm going to just come here. We put it in 4/4, and now we have a tempo detection of the event itself. So if I wanted to throw in something like do something horribly inappropriate, let's find a drum loop. Okay, so let's say I wanted to just throw that drum loop in. I'm going to just put this on to the downbeat. So right here, I'll just make sure my snap is turned on. And we're going to make sure that that snaps to our downbeat. And I'm going to place this into musical mode. And as we do this, we can now just, I'll just grab the fader here. And so now that that's placed in musical mode, it will automatically just follow the tempo changes. of the jazz track. So now if I wanted to also very easily, let's say I'll just remove this selected track. So I'll come here, and let's say if I wanted the musicians to all play a little more in time, I will take all the files here and I'm going to place them. I'm going to go to my audio menu to advanced, and we can see that there's a different tempo basically on every single beat. And I'm going to say set definition from tempo, and that's going to basically at the project level or within the audio files themselves, embed the metadata of the tempo changes of every single beat into every one of the files. So as I wanted to make this just a steady beat, so let me just come here. I'll just make this bars and beats. So if I just come to my tempo map and turn that off, I could just type in 140 beats a minute. And now every track will play back at 140 or 120 or 156, 168. So now it's playing back perfectly even. Let's say I want to do 144. I could also just take the existing tempo, and let's say the musicians got a little carried away. I could select the tempo here, and if I wanted to speed up, or if I wanted the tempo to kind of be more tame and more kind of in control, we're able to, do stuff like that very easily. So if I wanted to just speed up. And then as we get to the original tempo, now we'll go back to our original. So, if you have like a group of musicians that's performed, you could just, easily kind of correct the multi-track recording of tempo anomalies if you need to. So that's some of what you could do with tempo detection. Okay, just, all right, we have a lot more discussion. Let me just go through. So see question, I would like to be able to stream from Spotify into Cubase when referencing mixes, as I no longer buy MP3 waves. Is there a way to do that, or is that a hardware thing? To do it, what I would do is, if you have, if you have a second audio interface, or just using the built-in interface, and if you have two additional inputs, what you could do is, if we go to your audio connections, we could set this up under your control room, and you could have an external input. So let's call this Spotify, and I have the output of my, built-in laptop audio going into two inputs of my system. So at that point, I could listen to my mix and go to the control room and go to my external source and say, okay, this is my Spotify stream. And I could just say, when I come here, we're going to listen to Spotify, listen to my music. So again, you want it kind of within the same audio interface. So clocking is preserved and you're listening to the same source. So if you have a way of being able to kind of pipe it to two inputs, you could do that. And even if it's a digital connection, like a SPDIF out of, a lot of times, sometimes even built-in audio interfaces, you can get a SPDIF out and just take a SPDIF out from that, or from your built-in audio interface on the computer or laptop directly to an input, and then just simply come here and go to your external input and choose that. So that's one way of doing it. And if you don't have that, you could spend 99 cents on the song. I'm sure the artist would like it. Okay, question, is there a quick way to remove an insert other than selecting no insert? Sometimes I want to try out different plugins and quickly swap it out. So let's say if I have an insert on this particular track, so let's say I have a delay, and I just wanted to get rid of the insert, so instead of having to come up here and, choose no, what you could do is just simply drag it out. So that's all you have to do. So if you have a plug-in here as an insert and you don't like it, just drag it and kind of take it out of the area here and just bink, and then the insert will be gone without having to go up and select no insert. Okay. Okay, let's keep going. Just see a comment that it's awesome. My son is watching old TV shows. I think he's watching a lot of stuff on Disney during the pandemic, but he likes the Brady Bunch because there's a lot of kids. So, for him, it has to have kids in it. That's a big criteria. So the Brady Bunch is a good, safe bet. Okay. Hi, Greg. Can you help out with multiple tempo detected in Cubase? Let's just see if there's so if you have like in this case, if we have these files, like these tracks that have tempo changes through them, and if you wanted to embed that as the metadata, a lot of times programs will allow you to only kind of work with a static tempo value, 80 beats a minute, 100 beats a minute. But a lot of times the files are speeding up and slowing down significantly and subtly. And, I've had artists, many times like, oh, my track is perfect. I use a drum machine. You do an analysis of it, and it's like, oh, the drum machine was off. Especially a lot of earlier drum machines. But, if you wanted to embed those tempo changes within the audio file itself, and again, you could just, select a file and come over here to audio to just say set definition from tempo. And you could have it in a project or within the audio file. So no matter where that audio file goes into later, you put it into musical mode, and even though the audio file is speeding up and slowing down, it will still conform to whatever the tempo changes are once it's placed in musical mode. So to see, Greg, since you're about caught up, please allow me to sneak this in with all of the AI pattern detection in Spectral Layer 7. Can I not use the same pattern analysis for a BPM tool? So, I haven't officially heard of anything on Spectral Layer 7, so I'm probably not the best one to comment on it. So, but I'm sure that they're working on, Robin and his team just do some amazing things. So I can't wait to see what they do. Okay. So I see a question. Can you please describe how I would set up a Source Connect and a Zoom connection at the same time? So I've never worked with Source Connect. So I'm probably not the best person to answer that because I don't have any experience. With Zoom, what I do and how I kind of run the audio for my Hangouts is I have My laptop is going out to a Steinberg UR24C audio interface. The analog out of that is going into a mixer. My microphone is connected into the same mixer, and that mixer, which is a Yamaha MW12CX, kind of like a license plate for a model name, but that it has a USB audio out. So I transmit all the audio for the Hangouts through the mixer. And I've done that for Zoom a number of times, and that's worked out really well. And, I find that's kind of the most, the most pragmatic and practical and most kind of bulletproof solution. So, but I haven't really worked with Source Connect. So I'm not the best person for that. Okay. All right, let me just sneak back up. We have a lot more discussion. I just see who's this track at 2 hours and 37 minutes. So I could tell you but I don't know what track was playing. So, all right. But if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I could tell you after. All right, so I see a question, tempo track, what does the orange on button do? So if I have this turned off, it's going to play back a steady tempo without any tempo changes. If I have a tempo track with tempo changes and I want Cubase to follow that, I could now just turn that on, and now Cubase will play back all the tempo changes. So that goes from kind of what could be a variable tempo, a tempo map, or kind of we could think of this when it's disabled and not orange as a static tempo, kind of one value. Just seeing great comment from Gareth. This is like, that's illegal doing that. I think it's with the jazz piece, doing the tempo track. So yeah, it's kind of blown a lot of people away over the years. Okay, so just seeing from Charles Day, is there a control room in Cubase AILE? The control room's only going to be found in the Cubase Pro version. Okay. Okay, so we see a question. So how do you create a bus for different tracks? So if I wanted to take like all my drums in this particular track here, so let's say I have like all my overheads, I could right click and just add a group channel to selected channels. So I could come here, add a stereo group, and I'll just create this outside folder. And there's our group. Now, if I have another group channel, so let's say I just come over here and add a group channel. I could now take, let's say this is group 4. I could take my piano, sax. Let's say I want to take my bass and piano tracks. Then if I wanted to, route those to the group, I could just come right over here and say, this is going to group 4. So if I wanted to just send the output destination, I could send it to a group like so, or you could do it through a send. So if I wanted to just come here, I could also send to multiple groups here through my through my sends. Let's see, Pablo's getting coffee. I'm jealous. All right. I miss going out and getting a mocha. Okay. Okay, so it says a MIDI question: when applying MIDI changes from the inspector, such as modifiers, is there a way that these changes apply to one MIDI segment and apply different changes to an adjacent segment? Okay, so let's give it a shot. Okay, so I'll just kind of split here and create some different segments. So let's say, so I'll come here. Let's just say I'll put in a quick, so I will just kind of draw in a note here. And so now I'm going to choose, and let's just say this note is lasting. And let's choose, so if we have this going through our patchy, let me just draw in a chord. Just make it a little more practical here. Okay. So if I draw in a chord and we go to our freeze MIDI modifiers, which will write in those values. So let's say if I switch I want this to be all down. So I'm not sure if it's going to be global per track, but we'll give it a shot here. Just see if we could see this a little better with our. So it looks like it will kind of take whatever. So those are all going down, but if I select just those notes and just do let's say I change the arpeggio direction here to up. So we see this pattern here, and we'll select those and let's see if it changes here. So it looks like it may kind of do it for the selected parts and keep those independent. I see a question, how old is my son? He's 7. Okay, so a question from Ray. Greg, can you show, please, how various inversions show up on chord track keys at the bottom of the key? So I think this may be with chord pads. So let's say, let me just load up a patch here. Okay, so let's say So just make sure I had a question right. How do various inversions show up? So when you kind of look at, you can kind of see the visual representation. So let's say if I'm here on E minor, if you look kind of at the bottom of the chord and we have it in adaptive voicing, you kind of see visually here at the bottom what the voicings for the chord. So that way you kind of get a sense visually of how wide or narrow the chord voicings and inversions are. So, and if you want to do different tensions. So. All right, so I see Gareth is probably going to sleep. I know it's late in the UK. Okay, just going through. All right, and Ambient Dave signing off. All right. Okay, so I see is Cubase Nuendo capable of analyzing a music track for a root note? I noticed that Apple has one free and was looking for one. The audio, audio analysis and kind of detection to MIDI is currently for set up for monophonic audio, so it's not designed currently to do polyphonic. So. Okay, so we have a question. How can I remove... sorry, wrong mouse. How can I remove a plugin from list? Okay, so if we come over here to... and go to your studio menu to VST Plugin Manager. So you have this as kind of a default, which will be kind of all of your plugins, and you could have these organized by manufacturer or not, but all you have to do is you see it in the collection here, and if you don't want that particular plugin, you could, I'll just duplicate this. So I'll just, let's say I'll copy the current one. So we'll call it July 21. And then all you have to do is just come over here and say, just right click and delete the plugins that you don't want to have visible, and then they won't show up. So you just make your own plugin collection and just right click on the plugins from the collection. Then it won't be kind of in your way. Okay, so question, what's the best way to route the metronome? I'm getting an error message on opening Cubase, unmapped for the metronome info for UR22 Mark II. So, what I would do, you could have the metronome just kind of output through the audio interface like we hear here. And if I have let's say I just have my left and right locators set, what you could do is if you go to the project menu and go to a signature track, one of the things you could do, I'm not sure why you get the message for the metronome, but, an easy way to doing this, I think it's with 9.5 and higher, you could just say render audio click between locators. And now that's just rendered as an audio file directly there. So that's probably the easiest way to route the metronome, is just have the metronome automatically generate the audio file. Okay. Okay, so question from Charles Day. Can you show how to create an ARP? And we kind of did this a little bit with the arpeggio here, but we'll show it. So I will just kind of come here. So in MIDI plugin, so I'm just going to play, let's say, an F major chord. And we could go to, depending on your version of Cubase, you could have different arpeggios. So I could come over here. Let's say I just wanted to have, I wanted this to be, eighth note triplets. I wanted the length to be, the range. I only wanted it to be within. And if you wanted to, you could now just, hit record here. And I will turn on this little button. And then it's just, recorded all of the arpeggios that you've done. So, there's a number of different ways of being able to do that as well. So, the MIDI insert plugins are really kind of ideal tools for that. So I see I created a VST Connect track. How do I delete it? So let's say if I come over here to my VST Connect. Okay. All right. So once you have that set up, I think you could just go to your VST Connect here and just say remove VST Connect SE and then just remove selected track. Okay, just looking, see if I could catch. Just scrolling back, see if I could catch. Okay, make sure I wasn't missing anything. Okay, so I was just saying it was probably with from Ray, but mine don't show up at all, and this might be with the chord pads that we were doing. So I think it's they just show up right there. Let me just see if there's any settings that might cause that. Yeah, I've never not seen them show up, but if you want to send me a screenshot of maybe as you hover, or if you open up the chord pads after adjusting, let me just pull up a new preset here. And see if it changes. It looks like it's always kind of showing up for me. But if you want to send me a screenshot to Club Cubase at Steinberg.de, I might be able to figure out from a screenshot. Okay. Okay, so I see a question. How can I get the audio connections to keep my setup as a excuse me, as a default preset? I keep having to make the same connections over and over again. I've seen sometimes like on the Mac platform, I'm not sure if you're on Mac or PC, if, it could depend if like the last audio interface is different, or if it's not seeing, and sometimes I've seen like, hooking up a webcam because it has an audio port, could throw things off, and, it's seeing that there's new audio devices. But I'm not sure if you tried, Craig, to save as a template, but if you save as a template with those settings, see if that makes a difference for you. All right, good to see Mac on Hangout. I haven't seen him in a while on a Hangout. It's great. He says he's just having too much fun with this Cubase Pro. I'm blown away every time I use it. Stay safe, Greg. I hope you and your wife are doing great, Mac. Good to see you on a Hangout. Okay. Okay, so okay. So I see Terry Dean is back, and he forgot to hit the like button on his way out. That's nice. Seeing a nice comment from Michael Teens. Thanks, Greg. You did a great job of making this massive program usable for all of us. A big thanks for Greg. A big hand for Greg. Thanks. I'm glad I could help. We know there's a lot of people that are kind of spending more time at home, and it's a great time to get into your Cubase. Okay. So question from Terry is a good one. What are the features and functions you'd like to get into that haven't been discussed yet? I don't really have an opinion on that. It's like I remember it's kind of interesting. Hans Zimmer once when was kind of doing, we get together periodically and just we'll spend a day or two working. And, one thing he said to me once that was kind of interesting is that I always run. He's like, Greg, you're the only one that doesn't run Cubase for yourself, but you run it for other people. So I don't really know what to show. Sometimes if you go, oh, show me something cool in the logical editor or project logical editor, I can't come up with it. But if you ask for a specific thing, then I could show you. So it could be a hard question to, I don't ever think about it as like what I want to show. I'm really want to show what you guys need to see or what you're not understanding. So that's kind of that's my perspective on it. So I'm sorry if that's a disappointing response. Okay. So question, hi Greg, can we transpose chord pad and octave? Let me just check one thing here real quick. Just got a quick message sent in, maybe like for the Hangout here. Okay, so let me just jump back to where I was. All right. Okay, so just had a question how to find the lowest note within an ARP chord. I think we just had it kind of sent in. So I think we covered this in the last Hangout too, but I know it may have been in the middle when we lost our audio connection. So I'll go ahead and show it again here. So if I have like my arpeggiated part here, I will just... Let's look at this So if you want to see the lowest note, so if I have this selected, I just wanted to select the lowest note. Yeah, we can do this in the logical editor. So let's go to your logical editor. We want the function to choose select, and then we'll say type is equal to note, and then let's see, value 1 is equal to, let me just see, I remember. All right, so we want to select notes that the value 1 is, I think there was, I did it on the last Hangout, and now I'm just kind of forgetting. Let me just see. Okay, so I could just say, let's do equal to the lowest pitch. So now if I wanted to come here, I could say I want to select note events that are the lowest pitch. So I'll just come here, and now it's selected all of those notes. And if I have these selected, like if I wanted to select particular range, you know, you could do that as well. But just coming over here, so just to select the lowest note of the arpeggio, and then if you wanted to, you know, move that down an octave, you can hold Shift and arrow up as well. So that's how you could do it with the logical editor. Okay. Okay, so you see SPDIF still supported? Yeah, so SPDIF is still supported. You know, just if your audio interface has SPDIF, you know, and has an ASIO driver or a core audio driver, then, you know, you can send audio out to SPDIF. It's not as widely used anymore, but yes, it's you can still use it, and it's handy for clocking and doing other stuff. So you see, hi Greg, is it possible to preview audio MIDI in Media Bay half double speed, specifically loops? Not that I know of, but you know, once you have it, once it's in the timeline, you could, you know, if it's not in the Media Bay, so I realize that, but if you wanted to see what it was like in the timeline, so let's say if I just wanted to, so if I have that in my timeline, you could go to, and there's key commands. I think I had this set up. So if you go to key commands, and then under transport, there's like a shuttle play. Yeah, so look for shuttle play, and I think I had. So now if I wanted to just kind of play, and I know it's not in Media Bay, but if I come here, I think it's, let me just make sure it's not armed. So if I play back at normal speed, so, but if I wanted to shuttle, I could say, let's do twice the speed, and let me set up a key command for half speed. So, and I know it's, let's say shuttle play times 1/2. Okay, so now if I just play back at half speed or normal speed, but it's not within Media Bay. But once it's in, you could audition and get rid of it. So I know it's probably an extra step. Just seeing Terry saying he uses SPDIF between his KA6 and his O1X. So you don't see many O1Xs still in use. That's great. So let's say okay, so string squeaks between chord changes for acoustic guitar. What is your favorite way to remove them? So I use spectral layers for this a lot. So let me just do a new project. And I think I have like an acoustic guitar that we might be able to use for this. I think this might work. Okay, so spectral layers, a lot of times when we do editing of audio, we edit the entire frequency spectrum. So if I cut, it cuts all of the frequencies here. So. So let's say I wanted to come over here. I could select the audio then, and you could do this in I think even the spectral layers element. So I'll just show you what you could do, some of the magic of spectral layers. So if I just wanted to come here, what you have kind of set up is, we can think of this as you're almost looking at the top of the audio waveform. So we see low frequencies here and kind of higher frequencies as we go up. So I will just kind of, let's say we'll just kind of zoom in. So, what spectral layers will allow you to do is to kind of edit out just particular frequency ranges. So let me just put this to the beginning here. So as you want to just kind of come in. So let's say there's just a little bit of a little pop, like maybe a string, just the finger hitting the strings. And what you could do is just kind of grab, the eraser tool, and you could just, very easily just kind of come in here and just erase kind of, independent frequencies of this. And that will just kind of diminish, the little pops or clicks or squeaks. And after a while, you get really good at just kind of figuring out, seeing visually. See if we can find a squeak. So even here, there's just a little bit of a squeak. So you could just kind of take out those frequencies. And so for guitar squeaks, people that do it a lot will spend a lot of time in spectral layers doing kind of frequency based stuff. So, and, keep your eyes and ears peeled, because I hear there's something new coming from them, from the developers there. And okay, so a question. Hi, Greg. Recently upgraded Cubase 10.5 and noticed that the Cubase 10 install is still on my PC. If I uninstall 10, will it remove shared components with 10.5? No. So, you could completely uninstall 10.5. 10.5 will kind of extract all of your user settings and all the data over the first time. You'll get asked for that, but keeping Cubase 10 on there, doesn't add a lot of space. So if you really, need to clean up space, you could do that. But, it may be less than a gigabyte of space, like 800 megs or something like that. So, but you could, the two will completely, work independently of each other. So. Okay, so hi Greg, question: can we transpose chord pad in octave high or low? I'm not sure if it's set up for that. Let me just get a quick instrument open. And we'll check out. So as you do this, so that is an octave higher. So as you kind of go through the different, but let's see if I come here and, so if I have a track and I have the chord track as the chord pads as the MIDI input here. So let's say I have the chord pads, and I want to go to my MIDI modifiers. And let's just say I go up 12 here. So, and if I bypass the MIDI modifiers, turn this on. So let's say if I put this to 24 instead, so now put it to 12. So this way the MIDI notes that are being sent from the chord pads can have your real-time transposition. And let's do minus 12 just for sake of argument. So that's a approach to do it. Okay, let me just kind of go through. Okay, so just reading through different comments. Okay, so question: how can I set up metronome to sound before I record? So I think that's what I have in my setup here. So I just come here, and so if I have my metronome turned on, I'll hit C. And hit record. I should get, I think, a 2-bar count in. Let me just, all right, let me just check my, all right, so I think if we come here to our metronome setup, there's I think let's go to transport to metronome setup, that you could have number of bars for count in. I think it defaults to 2. So at this point, I come here, hit record, and it doesn't move. So you have a 2-bar count in before it starts to record. And again, that's going to be handled just transport to metronome setup and number of bars in count in. Okay, reading through different comments. Thanks for all the great comments, and hope everyone's learned a tip or trick. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that so you can find out about other Hangouts that we do. And feel free to give a thumbs up as well if you've learned a new tip. Okay. So question about, so is it okay to delete the Cubase installer after installing Cubase? I just don't want to mess up anything. Yeah, once it's installed, you don't need the installer. I mean, some people will keep it just in case they need to do a reinstall. So, but yeah, you don't need to keep it. You could always download it later. So I see you just comment, as a beginner, the chord pad is a bit confusing. It seems to change the voicings by itself. So if you come here, we notice that you could have this thing called adaptive voicing. So if you right click, you could just kind of, turn on and off adaptive voicing. So if I come here, and I've had discussions with some of our staff in Germany, some of the developers in planning, if it makes sense to adaptive voicing to be on by default or not. So now that I've turned off adaptive voicing and I changed the voicing, the other ones don't change. So try right clicking on the pads and try just right clicking and unchecking adaptive voicings, and that may make more sense for you. So we have a question: is there a way to make velocities more even? So let's take a look. So let's say I have my 21st century composition here. And let's say my velocities are kind of all over the map. So one of the things you could do is if you just kind of, let's say we select the notes here. If you wanted to, you have these little great functions. So if you wanted to increase or decrease your velocities, you could do that. But if you go to the right edge in the center, you could kind of compress or expand the velocities there. And then you could also tilt, so if you want to tilt to the left or to the right, you could do that. But check out this center control here. So if you find that your velocities are kind of a bit wider in range than you would like, just try adjusting right there. Okay, so a question, please explain drum mapping. We already have your drums recorded in MIDI and all your drums and percussion are on separate tracks. So one of the things that you may want to do if you have, your stuff on separate tracks, is you could merge those together. So let me just find a quick example of this. I'll drag it over. And we'll just add this. Okay, so I will just quickly add a drum kit with some patterns. Okay, so I will just kind of drag a pattern over here. So one of the things that a lot of people miss with drum editor that's like really slick is the ability to, once we have, let's say if you have a drum map, which you could automatically, if you have like Groove Agent, you could automatically create the drum maps from the instrument. At this point, now when you double click, you'll go straight into a drum editor. So, and let's say if I want this to only show sounds with events, but if you slide over, you have like in notes and out notes. So if if you wanted to have everything on one track, and let's say, the kick is coming from a different source, like C1 should be set to C sharp 1, you could come here and just kind of change the particular drum sound here. So you can have independent in notes and out notes. So that's a really handy thing. So if you get a MIDI file from someone or drum part and it's not matching up, just, take their in note and remap it to separate out notes. And if you needed to automatically split this to different parts, at that point we could go to your MIDI menu and choose to dissolve part, and we could split by pitches. So we'll just say separate by pitches, and now we could come right over here and everything will kind of be broken apart into their own individual lanes. So those are some things that you could do with drum mapping. But if you have your events and you wanted to just copy them on top of each other, you could just come here and just copy the events kind of directly on top. And then, so if you have like 3 or 4 parts that are merged together on top of each other, grab the glue gun and hold down the Alt key, and then that one part can have multiple parts within it. So I used to see a question, where can I find a comparison chart of different versions of spectral layers? So I guess they found it. So, all right. So I see a question, can I use the Isotope plugin Vocal Synth 2 with that variable effect editor? Is that the VaryAudio? So as long as it's a monophonic audio source, you could run it through VaryAudio without any problems. All right, so let's go. I know we had questions that were sent in advance, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of those. All right, so it says I have Cubase 10.5, Dorco 3.5. My project on Dorco is on 6/8 dotted quarter note, value 141. Can't match the audio nor the MIDI to be recognized as dotted quarter notes on Cubase. So, if it's a Dorco file, you're not taking any audio files. So Dorco doesn't, I guess the only audio it's going to deal with is the audio from a video file. So so how you're getting the audio from Dorco over, but the audio file itself won't necessarily have it could have a tempo value, but not necessarily based on quarter note or eighth note or dotted quarter note. So that's generally how the audio. So I think if you just, saved it as a 6/8 file, that you should be okay, especially like Dorco transmitting it back and forth as a MIDI file or music XML. I think Jose was on a hangout. We may have covered that a little bit. Okay, so we have a question. I'm using Wavelab Pro, and I was wondering if it's possible to edit multiple tracks at the same time in a montage or anywhere else in Wavelab. Example, I have a montage of channels, lined in parallel. I set up what I want to select the area of the channels if at the same time and delete them on all channels. So I think I have Wavelab booted up here. So let's say if I want to select a range in Wavelab, so I'm going to go to the Edit tab, and then we see erase selected edge, and there's going to be just a little drop down menu, and we can say erase selected range on all tracks, and that will take care of it for you. You could also, if you wanted to do just like, we'll select a range here, and I could just delete where the files won't leave a space when when they're erased, and all the tracks will just kind of get bumped back. So once you select a range, click here, you see erase selected range, and then a little drop down menu, and just choose to do that for all tracks. And that should do the trick. Okay, in Cubase 10.5, I was searching for a drum loop for a client in the loop browser from the media menu, and all the attributes where I would normally see instrument type, genre, subgenre, etc. are missing. How can I get them back? I've searched, I've attached a screenshot to show the screen I get. How do I, okay, so it's good. Take a look. So if we wanted to do this like on the right-hand side, Media Bay, so we'll just kind of jump home and we'll go to Media Bay over here. And once we do this, we could just see, you'll see kind of the different attributes in Spectre here. And what you want to do is you could click here, and under musical, this is where you can say category, subcategory, and then we could choose to have, genre, whatever. And let's see if it's the same in the full Media Bay. So as soon as you come here, just go to your attributes here, and then you could select different attributes for searching. So I've had it sometimes where it just kind of forgot what the attribute was and just had to reset it. All right, let me jump back to a project I had created. So someone asked, how do you get a note message? How do you have in Backbone a sound triggered when you let go of a key, like on a note off message? So let's take a look at that. I think I may have something kind of set up for that. Okay, and I'm just going to revert this quickly. Thanks for all the wonderful questions from everyone. I hope everyone's learned a tip or a trick. Okay, so let's say I have an instance of Backbone here. Let me just get the right thing to see. All right, so we have Backbone, and I have just say a sample, and I'll just triggering my MIDI note on message, and I will just open up the editor so you can see the note message as we do this. So you can see when I press the note, it's going to show up here as C2. All right, so now most of the times when you have samples, you could come up and you hit the note and you hear it, but you may want to have like one sound that's like a pad, and when you release the note, have another sound that's like an impact. So to accomplish this, if we just kind of go to, you click on kind of the tonal area. So we can see the sample here, and now you have a note off. So if we watch, I'm going to hit the key. We can see it indicated here, and then I release the key. Then that's when the sample plays. So you could have some samples that play for the note on message, and some samples and sounds that will trigger with the note off message within the same pad, within the same backbone preset. So you can have up to 8 different layers. So note down, note on, no sound, release, note off, sound. So that way you could have, some really creative sound design stuff, for impacts where it's like, for film and game stuff. All right, so we also had a question where someone wanted an easy way, and this is in Nuendo, to make cycle markers based on events. So what they were doing was kind of selecting an event, hitting the letter P, and then adding a cycle marker manually. And they wanted to know if there was a better way of doing this in one motion. So I created a macro. So let's open up my key commands. And I just created a macro. And a macro is a series of keyboard shortcuts that have been created that will run kind of in order. So I think I called this events to cycle marker. So what I did is, I said navigate to the right. So go to the next event, set the locators to selection, and that's the letter P, and then transport insert cycle marker. So I'll go ahead and just run, and we could assign a keyboard shortcut, your own user-defined keyboard shortcut in this under macros. So let's say if I want to come directly here, let's go to macro, and we're going to say events to cycle marker. Let's see if this keyboard shortcut is used for anything. Yes. All right, let me try. Okay. So I'm going to assign a keyboard shortcut. And now, instead of having to do those 3 steps all the time, I'll just come here. So I'll select this one, and then we could just go. And then that way you could automatically add the cycle markers based upon the length of the events and have that kind of automated. So once again, just the macro to create, and you can do this under key commands. Just 3 steps: navigate right, transport locators to selection, transport insert cycle marker. Okay, some other questions we had sent right before the Hangout started. Let's take a look. So a couple things that might come in handy. So a couple of feature requests. So we'll see. I think this might be from Terry. I think he's on the Hangout. So we'll see if we get through some of these. But I'd be willing to kind of do quick team viewer. Let's see if we could get through some of these. Okay, so quick search key commands instead of scrolling through the list. So as kind of a feature request. So if you just kind of go to your key commands, here you could actually just kind of search. So you could just say, I'm looking for, info, or I'm looking for, revert. And then that will kind of automatically, let's say I want to come here and go to cycle and hit search. That will automatically just kind of take you. So let's say I wanted to group. And then you could just search. So you have a search function here, but you could also, if you just kind of type in a key command, it'll tell you that function, and then you could actually select the function by clicking here. So there's already kind of a search function in the key commands area. Okay, and I see just a feature request. Can Steinberg make it possible to prompt us with the dialog box that props up as so that we can use a logical editor so we can fill in variables we enter in that dialog? So, some of this, I could pass that on, but a lot of times you can just make unlimited supplies of, logical editor presets. So, all right, so in a feature request, can we get the option to create a mixer view from selected tracks? So let's say I have this track. I'm just going to hold down my control or command key. I have these tracks selected. I'm in my mixer. So if we go to your configurations just directly here, we could just say show only selected channels. So there is kind of we could show all channels or show only selected channels. So that's already in there. We'll give you that feature free today. All right. So feature request. Can we get the nudge tool for the loop between the locators? I found key commands nudge the loop left and right. So yeah, I'll pass that on. Okay, so let's jump back to our live feed. We have a couple minutes. If we go beyond 4 hours, then we lose all of the handy YouTube when they do the closed captioning, and it helps people with different languages. So we'll try not to go beyond that. Okay. Okay, just going through some. So I see what is the best VST for guitar. If you're looking for, it depends what kind of guitar. If you're looking for acoustic guitar, I think that the T guitar, which works in Hallian, is a wonderful solution. So let's say if I just wanted to add this, we'll come over here to our T guitar. So and as we wanted to just kind of come over here to the editor, so you can play back, different tracks here. So let me just see where I am. Let me just set my input. So if I wanted to just kind of play chords, even though it's not voiced like a guitar player. But there's also entire kind of chord modes as well. So if you wanted to come over here and say, okay, let's go into patterns, and it's going to voice it like a real guitar would. So let's say. And you could have different voicings and different patterns on each key if you're so inclined. So for, creating kind of, played, how a guitar player would voice stuff for acoustic guitars, I think the T guitar is pretty fabulous for that. Okay. Okay, is there a way to add a group folder, a group and folder all at once? So let's take a quick look. I think there's a included macro that does that. So let's say I want to take these, if I hold down my shift key this time, that would help. So let's go to macros under edit, and I think I've added a lot of my own macros doing the Hangouts. But I'm pretty sure that there is a default macro that will do this. I may have accidentally erased it. But look under... Okay, yeah, here, selected tracks to new folder and add a group channel. So now you can just give it a name, and that's how you do it. And then if you wanted to colorize all of the different elements, you could just kind of pop right over here. And if you wanted to, select all the different tracks and colorize, you could do it like that. So yeah, so just look for that macro under selected tracks to new folder and add group channel. Okay. So I see how to activate Xbox controller on Cubase Pro, Greg. So I'm not sure what the Xbox controller would do, but there may be like I think there's Jazz Dude mentioned a program called MIDI Joys or something like that that could take a joystick and convert it into MIDI. So, all right, seeing a nice comment from Jason Sykes. Another great night of teaching. Thank you, Greg, and everyone. All right. So just seeing, do I need a program for the controller to function with Cubase, Greg? So generally, if it's, yeah, so I think it's MIDI Joys you may want to look at. Yeah, so it's basically, yeah, just as Jazz Dude mentioned, just look for, turning game controller into MIDI. Okay, we'll go just maybe a couple more minutes. So I see we need a motion sensor for Cubase. Cubase does have one. If you have I think it's a Leap Motion controller that works already. Hang on, my son's knocking. Just tell him. Okay. Apparently the Brady Bunch has had a very happy Christmas. Anyway. So is there a better way of transferring MIDI from my USB drive to audio other than recording each MIDI track separately to audio, again, using Motif XF? When you have 16 tracks, it's a long process. There's no need to convert it to audio. You could just have your MIDI information. I think there might be I know the earlier versions, there was like a translation between the two programs. But you should be able to save it as a MIDI file. Let me just talk to my son. All right, sorry about that. But yeah, if you're using the Motif XF7, you can just simply, record the MIDI data in through MIDI clock, and just transfer the MIDI sequence in, so you don't need to record it as audio. Just saying a question, maybe a Backbone SE for Cubase 11, Greg. I think Backbone is pretty unique, so I wouldn't necessarily anticipate an SE version for that, and it's priced pretty low. So I think it's a great tool. So. Okay. And with that, we're just about at time. We've gone about 4 hours. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everyone for all the great, wonderful questions that people have asked. It's always a thrill to get to talk to people from all over the world doing this. We'll be doing the next Hangout on Friday, starting at the same time, 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. So if you subscribe to the channel and like the video, that's always appreciated. But with that, we're going to wrap up. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we will see you on the next Hangout. Take care.